Everybody, my name is Paul, and if you explore my site at all, you'll see there's a lot of interesting content there about some fascinating subjects. And I explore consciousness and perception and ancient mythology and symbolism and so on. But I've been making this series about little stories and parables that I've heard over the years, inspired me on my journey. I started meditating when I was in my early 20s, back in 1973, and I've been exploring these kinds of subjects all my life. So let's get to some of the stories. Some of them had a little humor to them, and let's see if I can get them out right in a smooth way. So I'll start with the one with the ants. There were a couple of ants one day. They're out there on a little trail, and they came in. They met each other, and they started talking. And one of them said, "Hey, what do you eat?" So the ant says, "Well, I eat this stuff called salt. I think it's delicious, and I have a bunch of it in my house, and I eat it every day." So the other ant asked him, "Well, what do you eat?" And he said, "Well, I eat sugar. It's very sweet. It's delicious. It's so wonderful, and I have some in my house, and I'd certainly like to show you sometime." So the ant from the salt hill said, "Well, I don't know. Maybe go ahead. Let's come on to my house. Let's try some of my salt. I'll show you how delicious it is." So they went back to the salt ant's house, and they sat there and started talking about stuff, and they ate some of the salt. And the salt ant says, "So what do you think? Isn't it so delicious? Isn't it wonderful? I eat it every day." And the ant from the sugar hill said, "Well, it's okay, but I got to show you what I eat. So let's come back to my house, and I'll show you how beautiful the sweet sugar is, and then you'll know." So the ant who from the salt hill started thinking, okay, that sounds like a good plan, but I'm just going to take a little salt with me in case what he has is not as delicious as my salt. And he stuck a little bit back in the corner of his mouth, and then went over to the sugar ant's hill. So they went in there, and they're talking and everything, and the sugar ant comes out and says, "Hey," presents a beautiful display of beautiful sugar, and he says, "Hey, taste this sugar. Isn't it wonderful? I got lots of it here. You can eat all you want." So the ant from the salt hill started tasting this, and okay, yeah, whatever. And the sugar ant said, like, "Hey, what's going on? Can't you taste it so much more delicious than salt?" And the ant from the salt hill says, "Well, it kind of tastes a lot like my salt." So of course the sugar ant says, "Well, that can't be possible." So he forced the guy, says, "Okay, open your mouth," and he stuck his hand back in there. He says, sure enough, he had a bunch of salt back in the back of his mouth, and so all his sugar tasted like salt. So then he persuaded the ant from the salt hill to taste his sugar, and sure enough, they were all delighted with it, and the ant from the salt hill stopped eating salt. The moral of the story is, try something new, so to speak. So I'll tell you this little story, a parable I heard about. There was a guy walking along on a path to another town, and getting kind of in the early afternoon, and he had a little journey to another town, and he's approaching this small town, and he saw this guy coming from the direction he was going to head, and say, "Hey, sir, can you tell me what's on the other side of the hill?" So this is the guy was kind of beat up and wasn't very coherent, and he said, "Hey, whatever you do, don't go over there, because there's a pack of wolves over there, and I heard from a neighboring village that they got someone the other day." Now the guy was like a little bit suspicious. The guy was, told him about the wolves, was kind of like disheveled and everything. He wasn't sure if he'd been telling the truth or just a bunch of a crackpot. So he decides to go into the neighboring town just to stop and have a little beer there and a pint. And he pops into this pub, and he starts thinking about what his journey might be, and whether he should believe that there's some pack of wolves on the other side of that hill. So he starts listening to conversation, a bunch of happy people having a bar, happy hour, and drinking their beers and everything. And he figures out one of them is a teacher, and one of them is a politician, and another one's a merchant. So they're all having a good time, yakking away. And he says, "Sir, can you help me out? I'm on a journey to the neighboring town up ahead, and I wonder what was on the other side of the hill. I just met this guy down the road, and he says there's a pack of wolves over there. Did you hear about that?" So they all start laughing and joking around. So the lawyer, the politician says, don't worry about that. That's not even our territory. It's just like barbarians live over that way, so we don't even go there. And the teacher said, no, I know. There's no wolves in these parts. Don't worry about it. I'm a teacher, and I teach at a local school here, and, never seen any wolves around here. And then he asked the merchant, said, well, don't you hear about the stories of the people coming back and forth? And he said, no, so far I never heard. I don't do much trade with that town over there, but I never heard about any wolves. So the guy starts thinking, well, these three people, they're educated, they're pretty smart, they're going to tell me what's right here, they know the area, they've been living here a long time. So he starts on his journey, he goes to the next town and comes over walking around the other side of the hill, and sure enough, there's a pack of wolves and they killed him. So the whole story is, be careful who you listen to, because the person that you think might not be giving you the truth might be. Okay, so that's a little story. Now, there was a story about this king, and he had a merchant come from another town and try to persuade him, hey, you got to have mangoes in this town. I got to bring you some mangoes. And so he started asking people, and hey, do you know anything about this mango? What does it taste like? And so they try to describe it, and describe it, its shape, and there's different kinds, and you can eat them raw, and you can eat them cooked, and you can try to tell them what a mango is. The king is like, I don't know if I want those mangoes here in my town. So one guy had an idea. He says, look, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go back. I'll be back in a day. He goes and he gets a bunch of mangoes, and he brings up and he makes them a bunch of recipes, and he brings them back to the king and says, see, sir, this is what a mango is, and he can do all these wonderful things with it, and it's so delicious, and they're so plentiful, and you got to have them in your kingdom. And the moral of the story is, so you got to see it, taste it, touch it, to make it real. Otherwise, you're just talking. Okay, so here's a cute little story about the snake and the bridge. This little parable of a guy. There was a little town in India, supposed to be in India, and happened to be that there was a bridge across a little narrow canal that they had to go across every time to get into their town, in and out. And the problem was there's a couple of snakes that lived there. There's one big one, the chief of the snakes that lived down there, and every time they kept trying to walk over that bridge, a lot of people got bit. And they didn't know what to do because they don't want to kill the snake, and it's sort of like, they don't harm animals and those parts. So they went to the village wise person, the guru in town, and said, look, we don't know what to do about this snake. Half of us want to beat it to death with a big stick, and every single time we try to cross that bridge, a lot of times people will get bitten and they have to go to the hospital, and sometimes they even die, and we're about fed up with that snake. So the guru has a little magical powers communicating with animals, and so he goes over and has a little conversation with the snake, and he says, I'll tell you what's going on? Why are you bothering all these people? He says, well, it's my nature, and they're crossing my bridge, and they're disturbing where I live, and every time they go on my road, they thump and make a lot of noise down there, and I chase them off. So the guru says to the snake, well, I'll tell you what, you got to do what you got to do, but don't bite, just hiss. So after that, from then on, the snake hissed and gave a little warning, and all was well. They didn't kill the snake, and the snake said, okay, just leave me alone, just be on your way and don't bother me. So a little moral about something. So now there's the last one I have today, maybe one more after this, the frogs in the well. I may have told this some other place, but there were a couple of frogs, and one day they were jumping around in the neighborhood, and they met each other, and they got chatting. And one frog says, hey, where do you live? And they said, oh man, I have this great well. I live in this big, beautiful well, and I swim around it every day, and it's just wonderful in there. It's cool and shady. There's some tadpoles and stuff to eat in there, and I'm fine in there. So he says, well, where do you live? And the frog says, well, I live in a big pond. Actually, I live in a lake. And the frog said, well, what's a lake like? He said, well, is it as big as this? And he drew a little circle. Is it as big as that? And he said, no, it's quite a bit bigger than that. And the frog from the well says, well, is it as big as this? And then kept drawing bigger and bigger circles. Says, The guy says, no, no, it's much bigger than that. So finally the frog from the well says, look, how can it be bigger than that? That's as big as my well. My well is that big. So the frog from the lake says, well, just come with me. So they went over and hopped over and went into the lake, and the frog from the well goes, woo. So it's all about a perspective, and a little parable about, you know, exploring a little bit and finding out maybe life has a lot more to offer. Okay, one more little parable here. The mouse and the ink. So one day there's this guy, and he's got a little thing of ink in his feather, and he's writing his notes very carefully and everything, and he's getting along pretty good in his manuscript, and all of a sudden this mouse comes along and knocks over the ink, and the ink falls onto paper and starts smudging all his paper. Now, he's got a bottle there, and he could have caught it, I suppose, but he starts thinking to himself, I wonder why was that mouse running there? Why was the mouse? And there's a cat. Well, the cat was chasing the mouse. So why was the cat running? Well, the cat had nothing to do, and the dog was chasing it. So then he had gone and on description of why did the mouse knock over his bottle of ink instead of actually fixing the problem first and then trying to ask what happened. The whole point is that the priorities. See, sometimes we ask questions about, well, why is this and why is that, and then we don't really address the problem, but we're thinking about why the problem happened in the first place instead of fixing it first. Like a water leak in a pipe. Okay, fix the damn pipe or fix the hole in the boat and then find out how it happened. So little few funny stories. Hope you enjoyed them. Please like and share if you enjoy these stories. I have a bunch of them. They come to my mind sometimes, and I have little parables and little sayings and so on. Like, if it's important, have two. That's an old pilot saying, or a short pencil beats a long memory, and little things like that. So I'll come up with a bunch more, and I'll add to the content here. So thanks again for watching. Hope to see you in some of my other videos.